CSP realizes that no racist apartheid state has ever voluntarily dismantled its own tools of oppression. From the apartheid regime in South Africa, to segregation in the United States, it is only through mass resistance by the community that criminal regime of racist torture have ever come to an end. There is no reason to think Australia's refugee gulags will be any different. It is from this understanding that Cant Standby has developed an open organising structure which shows how just 40,000 people, in Australia's 5 largest cities, could easily bring large sections of the Australian economy to a halt, just by participating in simple coordinated non-violent highway blockades. There are already millions of people who oppose mandatory detention, so it is not as though we need to convince extra people to care about the refugees in an abstract sense. Instead, we need the millions of people who already care, to do something which the government cannot simply ignore. 40,000 demonstrators would be enough to form dozens of 250 people strong occupation sites. Spread out appropriately, they could cover basically every major urban roadway in the country. The economic impact of a simultaneous shutdown of Australia's major roads would be in the hundreds of millions of dollars in a single day. These non-violent occupations are already being used by demonstrators. These actions provide an open grassroots mechanism which communities use to enforce a type of economic sanction against the government's crimes against humanity. Opponents of mandatory detention simply need to raise the cost of the policy to the point that no government can afford to maintain it. By disrupting the economy, Cant Standby is going around the politicians, and speaking straight to the people who actually control the country, the billionaire class. Importantly, CSP is speaking to this class in terms they understand: economic sanctions. CSP is demonstrating that there will be no more business as usual. As long as the camps are open, CSP will raise the cost of mandatory detention, as high as it needs to go, until every single human being is freed from the government's gulags. Such a campaign might seem too difficult to organize, but in reality, these demonstrations have already begun. The Cant Standby Network Manual offers an open, accessible, organizing structure, which is already being used by dozens of demonstrators across the country to coordinate actions in their communities. A basic component of this structure is that the demonstrations are held on the first Saturday of the month at 2 p.m. In addition to this, the network manual includes a mini street directory with maps that show 144 separate rallying points. These points are spread out across Australia's 5 largest cities. Anyone can read the manual and use this framework to begin organizing demonstrations in their area. These maps show every pre-selected rallying point across the country. Since November 2016, there have been 5 consecutive Cant Standby National Days of Action. These have included dozens of demonstrations across all 5 cities, with established regular rallying points in Perth, Adelaide, and Melbourne. Demonstrations have also been held every month in multiple locations across Sydney. Coordinated solidarity actions have also been held in Cairns, Newcastle, and Canberra. The network has already coordinated multiple attempts at occupying roadways. There have already been 2 consecutive successful occupations in Coburg, Melbourne. Police were present at these occupations, as well as other CSP demonstrations in Melbourne, Perth, and Adelaide. There have been no arrests and no reported injuries at any of the actions. These precedents help to undermine many of the ghost stories, posing as arguments, that people often recite when the idea of civil resistance is mentioned. They will say, "You will all get arrested," or they will say it will never work, or they will say people who support the refugees will suddenly lose their humanity because of a strategic disagreement. But none of this has happened. No one has been arrested. Demonstrations have successfully shut down major roadways on multiple occasions with no arrests and no injuries, and the people who disagree simply participate in other actions. Since CSP has started, people have come together in ways that could have never been predicted before the campaign began. Each demonstration sets a further precedent and exposes the reality that non-violent civil resistance is in fact very possible, and at the end of the day, almost any group of people could do this. Cant's standby is gradually exposing the fact that churches, unions, musician fan clubs, any group of people with more than 40,000 members, already has the power to liberate the camps,